October 16, 1946, Nuremberg, Germany. The time is exactly 02:34 in the morning. 13 wooden steps. They creak under the weight of polished military boots. A man climbs them with a straight back. He does not shake. He does not beg. He does not blink. This is Alfred Jodl. For 6 years, he sat beside Adolf Hitler every single day. He was the bridge between a dictator's madness and the mechanics of slaughter. Jodl signed the orders. He turned maps into mass graves. He authorized the execution of thousands of Allied prisoners who had already laid down their arms. Now, the career of the great strategist ends in a rope. The United States Army wanted this night forgotten. They suppressed the details for decades. Because inside that gymnasium, the professional precision of the hangman vanished. The execution of Alfred Jodl did not go as planned. He stands on the trapdoor. The air is cold. The room is silent. The hatch opens. The gallows stood as the final destination. But the path began 56 years earlier in Bavarian Würzburg. His fate was already predetermined by a surname. Alfred Jodl was born on May 10, 1890. In his house, the military was the only religion. His father served. His uncles served. Since 1890, the Jodl dynasty lived for the uniform. It was not clothing, it was identity. By 1910, he enlisted in the Bavarian army. 2 years later, he was a lieutenant. He functioned within a system of blind obedience. Was there room for doubt? The answer arrived in 1914. The Great War exploded, and Jodl moved to the front. At the Battle of Saarburg, the romanticism of the family tradition met the reality of the meat grinder. Artillery tore the earth. Men died in the mud. Jodl was wounded. He saw the carnage firsthand. Yet the experience did not break him. It tempered him. He viewed the world through the narrow sight of a service rifle. By 1918, the empire collapsed. Jodl watched the surrender with a singular conviction. He did not seek peace, he sought a rematch. He left the war and began planning the restoration of German military power. While Jodl drafted maps for a collapsing Reich, his private life mirrored the chaos. He was a man of cold calculation and unexpected sentiment. Behind the strategist stood 2 women who defined his world beyond the bunker walls. Irma, his first wife, represented the old world. She was a countess, refined, aristocratic. Their marriage lasted 31 years, but as the German front crumbled, so did Irma. She died in April 1944. Jodl did not stop. He continued planning campaigns from Norway to the Soviet steppes. Why marry when the Reich is breathing its last? The answer lies in the date, April 7, 1945. Louise Katharina von Benda was more than a successor. She was Irma's close friend. She was also Jodl's secretary at the OKH. Through her hands passed the same criminal orders Jodl signed. Their professional bond turned personal under the weight of the war. The wedding took place 3 weeks before the end. Berlin was a graveyard of brick and steel. The ceremony was a ghost. No guests, just the bride in white and the groom in gray. Outside the window, the city burned. Allied artillery provided the wedding march. Louise and Jodl remained married for exactly 192 days. After the war, she became his most radical defender. She joined his legal team at Nuremberg. She challenged every document. She gave dozens of interviews. Louise argued that her husband was a soldier, not a murderer. Her crusade lasted half a century. Louise von Benda died on January 26, 1998. By 1939, the author of Sentimental Letters had moved to the center of the machine. He became chief of the operations staff at OKW. The title sounds administrative. The reality was lethal. Jodl was the brain behind every major Nazi campaign of conquest. How did the chain work? Hitler provided the intent. Jodl provided the mechanics. He drafted the plans, the Wehrmacht executed them, and cities across Europe began to burn. In 1939, his maps showed Poland. By 1940, they showed France, Denmark, and Norway. By 1941, his focus shifted to North Africa and the Soviet Union. Every day followed a strict, sterile routine. Jodl attended the daily war briefings in a cramped, tobacco-filled room. He sat inches from the Führer. He delivered reports on troop movements like an office clerk discussing quarterly quotas. His proximity was absolute. He saw the maps turn red. He heard the reports of mass casualties. He was not a distant bureaucrat or an abstract strategist. Alfred Jodl remained a present, active, and fully informed architect of the global catastrophe. Strategic planning ended in 1942, when the Commando Order reached the operational desk. Alfred Jodl did not just transmit the directive, he legitimized it. The Chief of Staff sat in the silence of his office. He took a fountain pen. He traced his signature at the bottom of the document. The ink dried as the order moved down the chain of command. In the field, a German officer received the paper. He read the instruction: execute all Allied commandos on the spot, even if they surrender, even if they are unarmed. Can a signature kill? On the Eastern Front, it destroyed entire villages. Jodl's handwriting transformed soldiers into executioners. In the barns of Norway and the fields of France, captured men stood with their hands raised. A sergeant stepped forward. He racked the bolt of his carabiner 98K, a single shot to the back of the head. This violated the Geneva Convention of 1929. Germany had signed that treaty. Jodl chose to ignore it. The brutality extended east. Jodl signed directives for mass civilian reprisals. If a partisan fired a shot, a village burned. He treated Soviet prisoners of war as expendable liabilities. Millions died from deliberate starvation and exposure in open-air camps. He expected officers' honor to shield him. Instead, he watched as his men shot defenseless prisoners in the back. Jodl remained professionally calm throughout the slaughter. He maintained the posture of a soldier merely doing his duty. This argument of blind obedience crashed against the reality of the evidence. On October 1, 1946, the tribunal declared his actions reached the level of crimes against humanity. Jodl faced the finality of the gallows. The argument of soldierly duty died on November 20, 1945. It perished in a Nuremberg courtroom. This was the city of Nazi rallies. Now it was the site of their reckoning. 21 leaders sat in the dock. They were the architects of a regime responsible for tens of millions of deaths. Hermann Göring, Wilhelm Keitel, Alfred Jodl. The charges included conspiracy to wage aggressive war and crimes against humanity. The dock was a wooden island in a sea of guards and journalists. Jodl sat rigid. He looked like a man waiting for a briefing, not a sentence. His defense rested on one pillar: obedience. His lawyers claimed the chain of command left no room for conscience. To refuse Hitler was impossible. Jodl's wife, Louise, fought for his life from the sidelines. She later claimed a breach of due process. According to her, the prosecution used documents they refused to show the defense. In a civilian court, this might have triggered an acquittal. In Nuremberg, the scale of the evidence outweighed procedural gaps. The tribunal dismantled the following order's defense. International law established a new standard. A soldier has a duty to disobey illegal commands. Jodl was not a low-ranking conscript. He was a colonel general. He sat inches from the Führer. He drafted the very orders that stained the continent. The evidence arrived in crates. Thousands of pages bore Jodl's signature. The Commando Order, reprisal directives, operational plans for unprovoked invasions. Each ink stroke was a death warrant. The trial lasted 10 months. On October 1, 1946, the judges reached the end of the list. Guilty on all 4 counts. The sentence was death by hanging. The execution was set for October 16, 1946. The tribunal spent 11 months dissecting the bureaucracy of death. By October 15, 1946, the legal process narrowed down to a single room and a final mechanical procedure. Alfred Jodl spent his last hours writing. He wrote to his wife Louise. He wrote to friends. He wrote for history. In every line, the former General Oberst maintained his innocence. He insisted his service was honorable. He claimed the judgment was merely political. In his mind, he was still a soldier. To the world, he was a criminal awaiting the rope. Did the condemned eat like kings? No. The final meal was grotesquely ordinary. Guards served sausage, cold cuts, and potato salad. There was black bread and tea. The clatter of forks against ceramic plates filled the silence of the death cells. It was the domestic comfort of a middle-class dinner, served hours before a scheduled killing. Shortly after midnight, the gymnasium of the Nuremberg prison transformed. 3 wooden gallows stood under the high ceiling. Master Sergeant John Woods and Joseph Malta prepared the equipment. They followed a strict, rhythmic schedule. Ribbentrop died at 1:11 a.m., then Keitel, then Kaltenbrunner, then Rosenberg, then Frank, Frick, Stryker, and Seyss-Inquart. Jodl was next. He walked toward the structure. He climbed the 13 wooden steps without assistance. At the top, he looked out and spoke his final words. "My greetings to you, my eternal Germany." The black hood muffled his voice. Joseph Malta tightened the noose. The executioner pulled the lever. The trap door swung open. But the mechanical precision of the Third Reich found no match in its executioners. The drop was supposed to snap the neck instantly. That was the protocol. Instead, October 16, 1946, became a display of lethal incompetence. Master Sergeant John C. Woods had falsified his credentials. He claimed experience he never possessed. How long does it take to die on the gallows? By the manual, seconds. In that gymnasium, it took minutes. Woods miscalculated the physics of gravity. The standard drop table of the United States Army dictated specific rope lengths based on the prisoner's weight. Woods ignored the math. The ropes were too short. The trap doors were too narrow. As the heavy wooden planks gave way, the condemned fell into a botched geometry. Their heads struck the sharp edges of the trapdoor frames. Jodl and Keitel did not just drop, they slammed into the wood. Blood smeared the interior of the gallows. Then came the strangulation. 16 minutes. That is how long Alfred Jodl struggled behind the black curtain. He dropped at approximately 2:34 a.m. His heart stopped only at 2:50 a.m. The numbers from the official death records strip away any remaining dignity of the procedure. Joachim von Ribbentrop took 18 minutes to die. Wilhelm Keitel, his face shattered and nose broken from the impact with the frame, struggled for 24 minutes. The witnesses stood in the cold silence of the Nuremberg gymnasium, while the men behind the curtain choked in the dark. Alfred Jodl's death was officially recorded at precisely 2:50 a.m. While doctors confirmed the official time of death, the United States Army was already constructing a polished version of the night's events. The military command insisted on a narrative of professional, near-instantaneous execution. Internal time records contradicted every public statement. Lieutenant Stanley Tillis observed the executioner from a few feet away. He watched the face of John C. Woods. Tillis later noted the sergeant's clenched jaw and a shifting, unsettled expression that disturbed everyone in the gymnasium. The tension was not caused by the gravity of the sentence. It was the visible realization of a botched mechanical process. The erasure began before sunrise. By the morning of October 16, 1946, the bodies were loaded into trucks and transported to Munich. The destination was a crematorium at the Ostfriedhof Cemetery. Personnel operated under false names. They claimed the corpses were those of American soldiers. The process of systematic elimination concluded at the river Isar. Officers scattered the ashes of the high command into the water. The current carried the remains toward the Danube, then the Black Sea. The Allied command intended to leave no physical trace on German soil. They wanted to ensure that not a single molecule remained for a future shrine or a site of pilgrimage. Alfred Jodl vanished into the water at the age of 56. No grave exists, no marker remains. Jodl's ashes vanished into the Isar, but his ghost returned to a courtroom 7 years later. 1953, Munich. A West German denazification court reopened the case of the executed Colonel General. Can a posthumous ruling erase a war crime? The German judges attempted exactly that. They overturned his conviction. Their logic was cold. Under German law, Jodl merely performed his military duty. The timing was no coincidence. West Germany needed a new army. To build the Bundeswehr, the state required the rehabilitation of its old officer corps. Politics demanded a clean slate. The international reaction was immediate. Allied governments responded with fury. They refused to recognize the Munich verdict. To the Nuremberg tribunal, the acquittal was a legal fiction born of Cold War necessity. History relies on paper, not political maneuvers. The Commando Order remains in the archives. The ink is dry. The signatures are authentic. Allied military records document thousands of soldiers shot after surrendering. Jodl's handwriting appears on the instructions for their execution. The legal debates of the 1950s eventually faded into silence. Documents outlived the judges. Alfred Jodl remained exactly what the archives preserved, the primary architect of the Wehrmacht's aggression. He was a man of precise maps and total loyalty. Nuremberg stripped away the rank. Behind the closed doors of a gymnasium, the strategist met a mechanical end. The executioner stepped back. Jodl struggled for 18 minutes as the rope tightened. It was the final physical consequence of a career built on signatures. He functioned as the brain of the high command. One hand wrote letters to his wife. The other signed the Commissar order. Intelligence served the machinery of annihilation. History ignores the later attempts at rehabilitation. In the final records of the International Military Tribunal, Alfred Jodl is listed as a convicted war criminal.